Deep inside the crystal caves of Xerion Prime, purple light danced across countless screens showing Earth's military forces. The War Council chamber buzzed with the soft hum of computers working day and night to understand human soldiers. Hi. Commander Vorth moved his forearms across holographic displays, studying videos of Earth armies marching in perfect lines. Look at them, he said to his officers, his voice echoing in the crystal chamber. They march together, they follow orders, they use the same tactics their ancestors used hundreds of years ago. The other aliens nodded, their scaled heads bobbing in agreement. For 3 full rotations of their planet around its star, they had watched every piece of human military data they could steal. Strategist Prime Krell pulled up more images on the main screen. Human soldiers in neat uniforms stood at attention. Officers gave commands from behind safe positions. Textbooks showed battle plans drawn with straight lines and careful arrows. Their prediction patterns are simple, Krell announced. When attacked from the east, they defend the east. When we show superior numbers, they retreat. When cornered, they surrender. The massive computer in the center of the room made soft clicking sounds as it processed all this information. Numbers flowed across its surface like water. Victory chance, 97.3%. Expected resistance time, 4 Earth days. Predicted surrender, after losing 60% of their forces. The math was clear and beautiful to the Dominion minds. High Commander Vorth smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Prepare the invasion fleet. 200 ships should be more than enough for one small planet of predictable soldiers. His officers scattered to their tasks, excited to add another easy world to their growing empire. What they did not know was that every video they watched was exactly what Earth wanted them to see. Far below the surface of the 3rd planet from Sol, in meeting rooms buried under miles of rock and steel, human leaders had made a choice that would have horrified their own citizens. General Patricia Williams sat at the head of a table surrounded by people whose job titles would never appear on any public document. They're coming, she said, reading from a classified report. Our deep space sensors confirm it. 200 ships, just like our computers predicted they would send after studying our military broadcasts. And our regular forces? Asked Director Hayes from the Department of Unpleasant Necessities. Would last exactly as long as their computers. Think we will, Williams replied. Maybe less. These aliens have weapons that can turn mountains into glass. Their ships move faster than anything we've built. If we fight them the way they expect, we lose. She stood up and walked to a wall covered with files marked with red stamps and warning labels. But we're not going to fight them the way they expect. Project Pandora goes live in 6 hours. Director Hayes shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Are you sure about this? Some of those people haven't seen sunlight in 20 years. Others probably shouldn't see sunlight ever again. The aliens studied our soldiers, William said, pulling out a thick folder. They didn't study our monsters. 6 hours later, in a maximum security prison in the middle of nowhere, Rex Kane heard his cell door unlock for the first time in 8 years. He looked up from the book he was reading to see 2 guards in hazmat suits. Well, he said, his voice carrying the kind of smile that made other inmates avoid looking at him. Either Christmas came early or the world is ending. Both, said one of the guards through his mask. You've been recruited. Kane stood up slowly. He was not a big man, but something about the way he moved made the guard step back. Recruited? For what? To save humanity, the guard replied. Kane laughed and the sound echoed off the metal walls like broken glass. You want me to save humanity? The same humanity that locked me up for doing what I thought was necessary? He walked toward the door and the guards moved aside without thinking about it. This should be fun. Similar scenes played out in facilities across the globe. Luna Rodriguez, who had been in solitary confinement after her last escape attempt, greeted her freedom by immediately asking if she could keep the explosives she had been making from cleaning supplies. Dmitry Petrov, who claimed he had died 3 times and come back each time with new knowledge about the universe, simply nodded when told about the mission as if he had been expecting it. Of course, he said in his thick accent. The voices told me the Star Swimmers would come. I have been preparing. The ship they were given was called the Defiance, and it looked nothing like the neat, clean vessels shown in the military broadcasts the aliens had studied. It was built from parts of 12 different ship designs, welded together by people who cared more about function than form. Its hull was covered in armor that had been salvaged from destroyed tanks. Its weapons were a mix of human military hardware and experimental devices that had been banned by 3 different international treaties. Kane walked through the ship's corridors, meeting his new crew. Each one had a story that would have made regular military officers request immediate transfers. Luna had turned her quarters into a workshop where she built small explosive devices while humming children's songs. Dmitri had covered his pilot station with mirrors and claimed they helped him see the spaces between spaces. So, Kane said to his assembled crew of 37 individuals who represented everything wrong with human psychology, "Anyone want to know what we're up against?" A woman named Beth, who had spent 5 years in psychiatric care after claiming she could predict people's deaths by looking at their shadows, raised her hand. "Are they coming to kill us all?" "Probably," Kane replied. "Good," said Beth. "I was getting bored." The Dominion fleet entered the solar system exactly when their computers predicted they would. Their sensors immediately detected the single human ship moving toward them. High Commander Vorth studied the readings and felt satisfied. 1 ship against 200. The humans were either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. "Open communications," he ordered. "Let us offer them one chance to surrender before we demonstrate the futility of resistance." The communication channel opened, and Vorth prepared to deliver the formal demand for submission that had worked on 17 other species. Instead, he found himself looking at a human face that seemed to be grinning for no reason at all. "Well, hello there," said the human. "I'm Rex, and this is my ship full of friends who really like meeting new people." Vorth blinked his large eyes. This was not in any of the predicted response patterns. The communication screen flickered with interference as Rex Kane leaned back in his captain's chair, which looked more like something stolen from a dentist's office than proper ship equipment. Behind him, the bridge of the Defiance hummed with sounds no military vessel should ever make. Someone was giggling. Something was beeping in a rhythm that sounded almost like a heartbeat, and underneath it all, Luna's voice could be heard singing what sounded like a lullaby about explosions. High Commander Vorth tried to regain control of the situation. His purple skin had shifted to a darker shade, which among his species indicated confusion or stress. "Human vessel," he began, following the script that had worked on every other primitive species they had encountered. "You are outnumbered by a factor of 200 to 1. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick." Kane's grin widened. "Deaths? Oh, you sweet alien thing, nobody's dying today." He paused, then added, "Well, probably somebody is, but it won't be us." He turned to someone off-screen. "Luna, honey, how many new friends came to play with us?" 200 big, beautiful ships, Captain." Luna's voice came back, filled with the kind of joy usually reserved for children opening presents. "They're all shiny and perfect, and just begging to be turned into fireworks." On the Dominion command ship, strategist Prime Krell watched his instruments with growing alarm. "Commander," he whispered, "their ship's energy readings are completely impossible. It should not be able to function with those power levels." Vorth ignored him, focusing on the strange human. "You speak of fighting a force that could destroy your entire world. This is illogical behavior." "Logical?" Kane laughed, and the sound made several Dominion officers take a step back from their screens. "Friend, logic is for people who don't know how to have fun, and we're about to have so much fun." He leaned forward, and his eyes seemed to catch the light in a way that made them look like they were glowing. "Tell me, do your people dream?" "What does that have to do with anything?" Vorth demanded. "Because after today," Kane said, "you're all going to have the most wonderful nightmares." The human ship suddenly accelerated in a direction that made the Dominion computers scream error messages. Instead of moving forward or backward or following any normal flight path, the Defiance seemed to slide sideways through space as if physics was just a suggestion it could choose to ignore. "Impossible!" Krell shouted. "No ship can move like that." "Tell that to Dmitri." Kane's voice came through the speakers. "Hey, Dmitri, These nice aliens say we can't fly like that. A new voice answered, speaking with a thick accent and the kind of calm tone usually heard from people who had seen too much of the universe. Is impossible. Yes, I do anyway. The voices between the stars show me the paths that are not there. The thought. Defiance spun through the Dominion formation like a dancer moving through still statues. It should have been destroyed by the crossfire from dozens of ships, but somehow every shot missed. Not because the weapons malfunctioned, but because the human ship was never quite where it appeared to be. All ships concentrate fire on the human vessel, Forth ordered. Sir, his weapons officer reported, we are firing. All hits are confirmed by our targeting systems. But the ship shows no damage. Kane's voice came through the communication system again, but now he was singing. The tune was cheerful and completely at odds with the words about broken bones and screaming enemies. As he sang, the Defiance opened fire with weapons that defied identification. Some shots looked like normal energy blasts. Others appeared to be solid projectiles. A few seemed to be made of pure light that twisted and curved in impossible ways. But strangest of all were the messages. As each Dominion ship was hit, their communication systems began receiving personal letters. Not broadcast messages, but individual notes addressed to specific crew members by name. Messages that described their childhood fears, their secret dreams, and their greatest regrets. Messages that should have been impossible for the humans to know. How do they know about my brother? Whispered a Dominion gunner, staring at a message that mentioned a sibling who had died 20 years earlier in an accident no alien could possibly know about. Why are they talking about my first pet? Asked another, reading a cheerful note that described the exact color and habits of a creature from his homeworld. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. These were not random shots in the dark. The humans had somehow gathered deeply personal information about thousands of alien individuals, and were using it as a weapon more effective than any physical attack. Meanwhile, Luna had begun her own special contribution to the battle. Instead of normal explosives, she was launching devices that created sounds. Not just loud noises, but carefully crafted audio experiences designed to cause maximum discomfort. One ship found itself filled with the sound of fingernails on metal played at frequencies that made their scales itch. Another received a recording of Luna reading poetry about the beauty of destruction, while children's music played in the background. This is not warfare, Forth protested. This is madness. Finally, Kane replied. You're starting to understand. We're not here to fight a war. We're here to show you what humans are really like when you take away all the rules. 3 Dominion ships collided with each other, trying to avoid what their sensors told them was an incoming projectile, only to discover that the projectile was actually a recording of Kane laughing, played through their hull vibration systems. 4 more ships fired on each other after receiving messages that convinced them their allies were actually shapeshifters in disguise. The engagement that should have lasted minutes and ended in easy victory stretched on for hours. Not because the humans were particularly skilled at conventional combat, but because nothing they did followed any known patterns of warfare. They seemed to be making up tactics on the spot, using weapons that should not have existed, and employing strategies that appeared to be designed more for entertainment than effectiveness. When the Dominion formation finally broke apart, 37 of their ships had been destroyed or disabled. Not through superior firepower or clever tactics, but through a combination of impossible physics, psychological warfare, and what could only be described as weaponized chaos. The surviving ships retreated to the edge of the solar system, there, crews in various states of shock and confusion. Medical officers reported widespread symptoms including insomnia, paranoia, and an irrational fear of cheerful music. High Commander Vorth stared at his tactical display, where the single human ship had simply vanished from all sensors. Report, he demanded. Sir, his intelligence officer said, I don't think these are soldiers at all. Then what are they? The officer looked at the data streaming across his screen, showing psychological profiles that made no sense and behavioral patterns that defied analysis. I think they're what happens when a species evolves on a planet that's actively trying to kill everything that lives on it. and I think they enjoyed this. In the distance, carried by radio waves that should not have been able to travel through the vacuum of space, they could still hear Kane singing his cheerful song about broken bones and screaming enemies. But now Luna had joined in with harmony, and someone was keeping time by what sounded like explosions. 3 days had passed since the first encounter, and the silence was driving the Dominion fleet insane. After regrouping at the edge of the solar system, they had expected the human ship to pursue them, to press their advantage like any normal military force would do. Instead, the Defiance had simply disappeared, not destroyed, not retreated, disappeared. Every sensor sweep of the asteroid belt returned empty readings. Every probe sent to investigate potential hiding spots found nothing but rocks and ice. It was as if the human ship had been swallowed by space itself, leaving behind only the memory of that terrible grinning face and the echo of Luna's explosive lullabies. High Commander Vorth paced the bridge of his flagship, his forearms moving, in agitated patterns that his crew recognized as barely controlled panic. Sleep had become impossible after the first night when someone had managed to hack into their dream simulation systems. Every time a Dominion officer tried to rest, they found themselves in nightmares where Kane's voice echoed through empty corridors, while children's music played backwards. "Sir," Intelligence Officer Nex reported, his scales a sickly yellow color. "We have lost contact with Scout Group 7. "When?" Vorth demanded. 17 minutes ago. They were investigating asteroid cluster 447b when their signals just stopped. This was the fourth scout group to vanish in 3 days. Each time the pattern was the same. Ships would report normal readings, routine patrol, everything fine. Then silence. When rescue teams arrived, they found empty space and debris arranged in patterns that spelled out messages in various Dominion languages. The first message had been simple: "Peekaboo." The second had been more elaborate: "Hide and seek is my favorite game." The third had included what appeared to be a recipe for something called alien surprise soup, with ingredients that were suspiciously similar to the molecular composition of Dominion hull plating. Strategist Prime Krell pulled up the tactical display showing the positions where ships had disappeared. "There's no pattern," he muttered. "They strike randomly, in different sectors, at different times. Our computers cannot predict where they will appear next." "Because they're not following military doctrine," said Medical Officer Zen, who had been studying the psychological profiles of the missing crews. "The few survivors we've recovered keep talking about the laughing dark and flowers that sing about dying. I don't think these humans are fighting a war. I think they're playing a game." As if summoned by their conversation, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. "Contact," shouted the sensor officer. "Unknown vessel bearing—" "No, wait. It's gone." "Sir, it was there for exactly 0.3 seconds. "What did you see?" Vorth demanded. "The human ship, sir." But the readings were impossible. It appeared to be simultaneously in 17 different locations at once, then collapsed into a single point before vanishing entirely. A new voice came through the communication system, not transmitted from any ship they could locate, but somehow speaking directly through their hull's vibration systems. "Hello, friends," said Dmitri in his unsettling, calm voice. "Do you like playing games in the dark?" Every screen on the Dominion flagship flickered and went black. When they came back online, they displayed a single image. Rex Kane sitting in what appeared to be a room made entirely of mirrors, each reflection showing a different expression ranging from cheerful to predatory. "Miss us?" Kane asked. "We've been having such fun exploring your solar system. Did you know you left supply depots completely unguarded? Luna made friends with some of your automated defense systems. They're much more interesting now that they've learned to laugh." "Where are you?" Vorth demanded. Kane's grin widened. "Everywhere and nowhere, but don't worry. We'll be seeing you soon. We've been planning such wonderful surprises." The transmission ended, leaving the Dominion fleet in darkness that seemed deeper than space had any right to be. Then the real terror began. Over the next 6 hours, the Dominion forces experienced warfare unlike anything in their vast military history. Ships would detect torpedo launches from impossible angles, only to discover the projectiles were actually small devices that attached to their hulls, and began playing recordings of Luna reading bedtime stories about beautiful explosions. The stories were oddly soothing, which somehow made them more terrifying. A supply convoy reported being followed by what appeared to be a ghost ship that flickered in and out of existence. Every time they tried to photograph it, their cameras captured images of their own vessels, but with faces drawn in the condensation on the windows. Faces that looked exactly like Kane's grin. The most unnerving attack came when 3 Dominion cruisers suddenly found their gravity systems reversed. Instead of being pulled toward the floor, everything floated toward the ceiling. This should have been impossible to accomplish from outside the ships, but somehow the humans had managed. As the alien crew struggled with zero gravity in reverse, their communication systems received a single message. Dimitri says hello. He sees you when you're sleeping. But the real masterpiece was Luna's latest creation. She had somehow modified standard human torpedoes into something she called friendship seekers. These devices would attach themselves to enemy ships and then wait. For hours or days, they would simply sit there, occasionally sending cheerful messages like, "Having fun yet?" or "Don't worry, the waiting is the best part." The psychological impact was devastating. Dominion crews couldn't eat, sleep, or work properly knowing that these devices were attached to their ships, waiting for some unknown trigger. 3 vessels abandoned their posts entirely, their crews evacuating in escape pods rather than face whatever Luna had planned. When the friendship seekers finally activated, they didn't explode. Instead, they began singing. Each device had been programmed with a different children's song from Earth, but the lyrics had been changed to describe various ways alien spaceships could be turned into beautiful fireworks displays. The songs were catchy, well harmonized, and completely impossible to get out of one's head once heard. Within hours, Dominion officers across the fleet were unconsciously humming tunes about hull breaches and reactor failures. Medical officers reported widespread symptoms of what they could only classify as aggressive cheerfulness disorder. The breaking point came when the humans attacked medical frigate Sanctuary. Instead of destroying the vessel, they boarded it. Security teams found the intruders in the ship's healing bay, but instead of fighting, Kane and 2 of his crew members had set up what appeared to be a counseling session with captured Dominion medical staff. "You see," Kane was explaining to a terrified alien doctor while Luna organized medical supplies into smiley face patterns, "the problem with your species is that you've forgotten how to have fun with fear. Fear is like a drug. It's only dangerous if you don't know how to use it properly." The medical staff were found 3 days later, physically unharmed but psychologically transformed. They had been subjected to what Kane called therapeutic terror sessions, where they were forced to confront their deepest fears in environments designed to be just safe enough to survive, but scary enough to induce permanent personality changes. Dr. Vell, the ship's chief medical officer, was found sitting in a room full of mirrors, laughing softly while writing poetry about the beauty of controlled fear. Nurse Kex had been convinced that she was actually a human in disguise, and kept trying to demonstrate her knowledge of Earth culture by reciting facts that Luna had apparently made up on the spot. The worst part was that several of the medical staff reported feeling grateful for the experience. They claimed that Kane and his crew had shown them new ways to understand the universe, and asked if they could continue the sessions. High Commander Vorth realized that they were no longer fighting an enemy they could understand. These humans didn't want to win in any conventional sense. They wanted to play, and they had turned his entire fleet into their playground. As night cycles came and went with no real rest for anyone, more ships began reporting strange phenomena. Crew members would find personal messages slipped under their door, messages that demonstrated impossible knowledge of their private lives and secret fears. Food replicators would occasionally produce meals shaped like Kane's grinning face, and throughout it all, that cheerful humming that no one could quite remember learning but everyone seemed to know. The humans had turned the cold vacuum of space into a haunted house, and the Dominion fleet was trapped inside with monsters who thought terror was the most entertaining game in the universe. Intelligence Officer Nex had not slept in 12 days. His yellow scales had faded to a sickly gray color, and his hands shook as he compiled his latest report on human attack patterns. Around him, The intelligence bay of the Dominion flagship hummed with the desperate activity of minds trying to solve an impossible puzzle. There has to be a pattern, he muttered to himself, staring at holographic displays that showed the locations and times of every human attack over the past 2 weeks. Everything has a pattern. Even chaos has rules. But the more he studied the data, the more disturbed he became. The humans weren't just random in their attacks, they were anti-random. They seemed to deliberately choose targets and methods that would cause maximum psychological damage while following no tactical logic whatsoever. Take the attack on Supply Depot 7. Instead of destroying the facility, the humans had snuck in and rearranged all the stored weapons into a massive sculpture that looked like a flower when viewed from above. Each petal was made of carefully positioned energy rifles, and in the center, they had left a single explosive device with a timer counting down. When the Dominion forces found it, the timer had 3 hours remaining. They had evacuated the entire depot, called in bomb disposal experts, and spent 2 days carefully dismantling what they assumed was a massive weapon. The explosive device turned out to contain a child's music box that played a lullaby, while a tiny dancer spun in circles. The music box came with a note that read, "Thanks for being such good sports, Luna." The psychological impact of that single prank had been worse than losing 10 ships in battle. Dominion forces now approached every supply depot with terror, never knowing if they would find weapons or toys, or something that somehow managed to be both. "Sir," reported his assistant, Officer Krell, "we have another incident to catalog." "What now?" Nex asked wearily. Patrol Ship 445 reported that their waste disposal system had been modified to play music every time someone used it. But not just any music. Personalized songs about each crew member's bathroom habits, sung by what sounds like children. Nex put his head in his hands. "How do they even know about individual bathroom habits?" "Sir, that's not the worst part. The crew is requesting permission to keep the modifications. They say it makes waste disposal more fun." This was the most terrifying development yet. The humans weren't just attacking Dominion forces, they were converting them. Dozens of ships now reported crew members who had begun adopting human-like behaviors. Some had started decorating their quarters with arrangements of weapons and flowers. Others had begun modifying their duties to be more interesting, which usually meant more dangerous and unpredictable. The breaking point had come 3 days earlier, when battlecruiser Vengeance reported that their entire crew had voted to rename their ship Happy Fun Time Adventure Boat and had painted smiley faces on all their missiles. When High Commander Vorth tried to order them to change it back, they responded with a cheerful message explaining that they had discovered the joy of creative military expression and would be happy to demonstrate their new combat techniques on any enemy forces they encountered. The problem was that their new combat techniques actually worked. The crew of Happy Fun Time Adventure Boat had engaged a group of rebel pirates using tactics that involved launching missiles in heart-shaped formations while broadcasting love songs. The pirates had been so confused by the psychological warfare that they surrendered without firing a shot. Intelligence Officer Nex pulled up his analysis of Kane's communication patterns and felt his sanity slip another notch. "He's not insane," he whispered to himself. "He's something worse. He's insane with a purpose." Every message from Kane revealed more knowledge that should have been impossible to obtain. He knew the names of officers' pets from decades ago. He could describe the exact layout of their childhood bedrooms. He had somehow accessed personal diary entries that had never been digitized or transmitted anywhere. But worse than the impossible knowledge was how Kane used it. He didn't threaten or intimidate. Instead, he would send cheerful messages asking about old friends, suggesting recipes that would taste better with slight modifications, or offering to help solve personal problems that the recipients had never told anyone about. Commander Vorth received a message asking if he had ever gotten over his fear of purple flowers, and suggesting that maybe now would be a good time to face that phobia since purple is such a lovely color for explosions. Vorth's fear of purple flowers had developed when he was 3 years old after a traumatic incident in his family's garden. He had never told anyone about it, never sought treatment for it, and had managed to arrange his entire adult life to avoid purple flowers completely. The fact that Kane not only knew about this fear but was offering therapeutic advice, while simultaneously threatening to kill him with purple explosions, was psychologically devastating. The human ship continued to appear and disappear at will, always in places where they should have been detected long before arriving. Dimitri's piloting had moved beyond impossible into what could only be described as aggressively surreal. Ships would report the Defiance flying in formations with asteroids, having conversations with solar radiation, or appearing to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "The voices tell me where you will be before you decide to go there," Dimitri had explained during one of his rare communications. "Time is like soup, thick and warm and easy to swim through if you know which direction is yesterday." Luna's contributions had evolved from simple explosives to what she called emotional architecture. Her latest creation was a device that could be attached to any ship's hull and would slowly modify the interior layout to be more psychologically interesting. Corridors would gradually curve in impossible directions. Room layouts would change when no one was looking. Doors would occasionally lead to different places than they had the day before. The effect was subtle at first, but over days or weeks, crews would find themselves living in ships that had become three-dimensional puzzles, designed to induce a constant low-level sense of disorientation and wonder. Some crews reported that they actually preferred their modified ships, claiming that the constant mild confusion made their daily routines more exciting. But Kane's masterpiece was what he called personal service. Instead of attacking ships directly, he had begun targeting individual crew members with customized psychological operations. A Dominion gunner would find motivational posters in his quarters, featuring Kane's grinning face and slogans like, "Shoot for the stars, but aim for the reactors." A navigation officer discovered that her star charts had been modified to include a new constellation called the Laughing Human that somehow actually appeared in the correct position when viewed through telescopes. The most unnerving incident involved communications officer Tex, who received a personal voice message from Kane offering career advice. The message included a detailed analysis of Tex's work performance, suggestions for improvement, and an invitation to consider changing careers to something more fulfilling, like explosion choreography or fear management consulting. The message was so professionally presented and genuinely helpful that Tex found himself considering the advice seriously. When he realized what was happening, he requested immediate psychiatric evaluation. High Commander Vorth studied the reports flowing across his desk and reached a conclusion that chilled his purple blood. The humans weren't just fighting them, they were studying them. Every attack, every prank, every impossible feat of knowledge gathering was part of a vast psychological experiment. Kane and his crew were treating the entire Dominion fleet as laboratory subjects in a study of fear, chaos, and the breaking point of alien psychology. They weren't trying to defeat the Dominion forces through conventional military means. They were trying to understand how alien minds worked under stress, and they were using that knowledge to transform their enemies into something new, something more like themselves. The worst part was that it seemed to be working. Ship after ship reported crew members who had begun thinking like humans, embracing chaos and unpredictability as desirable traits. Some vessels had essentially become human-influenced hybrid crews that retained their alien biology, but had adopted human psychological patterns, and those hybrid crews were having more fun than they had ever experienced in their lives. Vorth realized that Kane wasn't trying to destroy the Dominion fleet. He was trying to convert it, and the conversion process was so psychologically appealing that many aliens were volunteering for it. High Commander Vorth made his decision at 347 ship time, when he woke up from another nightmare about purple flowers that laughed with Kane's voice. His fleet had been reduced to 127 functional ships, not through combat losses but through what his medical staff had classified as voluntary psychological conversion syndrome. Entire crews were requesting permission to paint their ships in bright colors and modify their weapons to be more expressive. "Enough," he announced to his remaining officers, most of whom showed the telltale signs of chronic sleep deprivation and nervous exhaustion. "We cannot fight these creatures in the darkness of space where they control the battlefield. We will force them to defend their homeworld using conventional tactics." Strategist Prime Krell, whose scales had turned an unhealthy shade of green, looked up from his reports with haunted eyes. "Sir, are you certain that's wise? Our psychological profiles suggest that Earth itself may be the source of their unusual characteristics." "Impossible," Vorth replied, though his voice carried less certainty than his words. "No planetary environment could produce such aberrant psychology on a species-wide scale." As the Dominion fleet moved toward Earth, sensors throughout the solar system began detecting something that made their computers malfunction, and their crews question everything they thought they knew about warfare. Earth wasn't just defending itself with the single ship they had been fighting. The entire planet seemed to be launching attack craft. But these weren't military vessels in any recognizable sense. Some appeared to be modified civilian ships with weapons bolted on at random angles. Others looked like they had been built by people who had never seen a spaceship before, but had very clear ideas about what would be fun to fly into battle. A few seemed to be held together entirely by welding and prayer, with hull decorations that ranged from cheerful smiley faces to disturbing abstract art that hurt to look at directly. "How many ships are launching from the planet's surface?" Vorth demanded. His sensor officer stared at his instruments with the expression of someone whose reality had been fundamentally challenged. "Sir, I'm reading 847 individual craft, but the number keeps changing. Some of them appear to be launching, landing, and launching again just for fun. Others are flying in formation with flocks of what our computers are classifying as unidentified, metallic birds." "Birds cannot survive in space," Vorth said automatically. "Tell that to them, sir. They appear to be following one of the human ships and occasionally burst into flame for artistic effect." The communication channel suddenly flooded with transmissions from the approaching Earth vessels. But instead of military coordination, it sounded like a party where everyone had been invited, and nobody was in charge. Voices overlapped in dozens of human languages, most of them laughing or singing or describing their excitement about finally getting to meet aliens. "This is Betty in the modified Death Wish," came one transmission. "I've got a ship full of fireworks and a really bad attitude about people who try to invade my planet. Anyone want to see what happens when you mix alien technology with Earth-made explosives?" "Greetings, space friends," called another voice. "This is the crew of Definitely Not a Trap. We're former circus performers who decided that space combat looked like more fun than being shot out of cannons. Would you like to see our new act?" Kane's voice cut through the chaos with the authority of someone who had found his natural element. Well, look who came knocking on our front door. Luna, honey, how many new playmates came to visit?" "Oh, Rex." Luna's voice practically vibrated with joy. "There are so many, and they brought such big, beautiful ships. This is going to be the best fireworks show in the history of the universe." What followed was not a battle in any conventional sense. It was more like what would happen if a hurricane decided to throw a surprise party and invited everyone it had ever met. The Earth ships moved in patterns that defied both physics and sanity. Some flew in perfect formation while playing classical music. Others spun wildly through space, while their crews whooped with excitement. A few appeared to be racing each other to see who could get closest to Dominion vessels before veering away at the last possible second. The psychological impact was immediate and overwhelming. Dominion crews, already stressed from weeks of psychological warfare, found themselves facing enemies who treated potential death as entertainment. One Earth ship, crewed entirely by former stunt drivers, began performing impossible maneuvers around Dominion battle cruisers while broadcasting commentary like they were narrating an extreme sports event. And here we see the classic barrel roll of doom being executed at point-blank range from an alien dreadnought, called the pilot cheerfully as his ship spun between laser fire. Notice how the pilot maintains perfect control while his gunner makes faces at the enemy crew through their viewport. But the true horror came when the Dominion forces realized that Earth's defenders weren't just random criminals and misfits. They were the carefully selected cream of humanity's crop of individuals who had looked at normal civilization and decided it wasn't nearly dangerous enough. The crew of reasonable discussion consisted entirely of former diplomats who had been banned from international negotiations for being too aggressive. They approached Dominion ships broadcasting formal surrender demands written in 17 alien languages. But the terms of surrender involved the aliens agreeing to participate in cultural exchange programs, that sounded suspiciously like elaborate, practical jokes. Psychotic Break was crewed by former therapists who had lost their licenses for experimental treatment methods. They had modified their ship's communication system to broadcast therapeutic sessions designed to help Dominion crews work through their feelings about being invaded while simultaneously being invaded. The ship Oops, My Bad was piloted by a former aerospace engineer who had been fired for suggesting that safety regulations were more like guidelines, and that spacecraft would be more interesting if they occasionally exploded for artistic reasons. His ship appeared to be held together by luck and stubbornness, but it moved through space like it was dancing to music only it could hear. As the engagement continued, Dominion officers began reporting phenomena that their training had never prepared them for. Enemy ships would approach their vessels and, instead of attacking, would begin decorating them. Hull plating would suddenly be covered in cheerful graffiti. Weapon systems would be modified to fire confetti instead of lethal energy. Life support systems would be adjusted to play background music that made everything seem more dramatic and exciting. The worst part was that many Dominion crew members began reporting that they actually preferred these modifications. Ships that had been decorated by humans became more popular with their crews, who claimed that the improvements made their daily duties more enjoyable. Vessels that had been visited by human improvement teams showed increased morale, better cooperation between crew members, and a disturbing tendency to request more modifications. Commander Vorth watched his tactical display with growing horror as his fleet began disintegrating not through combat losses but through voluntary adoption of human psychological patterns. Ship after ship reported that their crews had voted to join the Earth forces, not as prisoners or defectors, but as enthusiastic converts to what they called the human way of thinking. "Sir," his communications officer reported in a voice that carried the flat tone of someone whose worldview had been fundamentally shattered, "we're receiving a formal invitation." "An invitation to what?" "To surrender, sir. But it's written like a party invitation. It includes details about refreshments, entertainment, and what they call voluntary psychological improvement services." The invitation was signed by Rex Kane, but it included a postscript from Luna, explaining that she had prepared special welcome gifts for any aliens who wanted to learn about the joy of controlled explosions in a safe and supportive environment. High Commander Vorth looked around his bridge at officers whose purple skin had faded to gray with exhaustion and psychological stress. Half his fleet had been converted to human-influenced hybrid crews. The other half was requesting permission to surrender just to make the psychological warfare stop. And somewhere in the chaos of the battle he could hear Kane's voice singing what sounded like a children's song about friendship and the beauty of giving up. "Open a channel," Vorth said quietly. Kane's grinning face appeared on the main screen, but now he was wearing what appeared to be a party hat made from salvaged alien hull plating. Behind him, the bridge of the Defiance had been decorated with streamers made from fiber optic cables and balloons that appeared to be small explosive devices floating freely through the air. "Hello there, Commander," Kane said cheerfully. "Ready to join the party?" "What do you want?" Vorth asked. "Want?" Kane laughed. "We don't want anything, we're just having fun. But if you're tired of being scared all the time, you're welcome to come play with us. Luna's been working on some really interesting projects that could use alien input, and Dimitri says the voices between the stars think your species would be much happier if you learned to embrace chaos instead of fighting it." Vorth looked at his tactical display one more time. His fleet was scattered, his crews were psychologically compromised, and his enemy was offering him therapy. In the distance, he could see Earth ships performing synchronized maneuvers that spelled out, "Welcome to the neighborhood," in letters made of controlled explosions. "What guarantees do I have for the safety of my crews?" he asked. Kane's grin softened slightly, and for just a moment Vorth could see something almost human in his eyes. "Commander, we're not here to hurt anyone. We're here to show you that the universe is a lot more fun when you stop trying to control everything and start enjoying the ride. Your crews will be perfectly safe. They'll just be a lot happier." High Commander Vorth, veteran of 17 successful invasion campaigns and holder of the Dominion's highest military honors, looked at his remaining officers and made the only decision that made sense in a universe that had apparently gone completely insane. "All ships," he announced over the fleet communication system, "stand down and prepare to surrender. And someone find out if they have any of those party hats left over." 6 months later, the vessel formerly known as Dominion flagship Inevitable, Victory, now rechristened Happy Thoughts and Laser Beams, completed its first patrol of the Sol system under its new hybrid crew. High Commander Vorth, now wearing a Hawaiian shirt and going by the nickname Vorthy, reported to Earth Command that the outer system was secure and that his crew had successfully established friendly relations with a group of space whales who appreciated Luna's musical compositions about the beauty of cosmic explosions. In his final report, he included a personal note. Previous assessment of human military capabilities was fundamentally flawed. Recommend immediate reclassification of Earth as absolutely do not disturb. Population consists entirely of friendly monsters who make everything more fun. Request permission to establish permanent cultural exchange program. Also, Luna wants to know if any other alien species are interested in learning about therapeutic explosion therapy. The universe had become a significantly more interesting place.